Welcome back, everybody. Today, I have my friend Beth Sanderson with us again. And most of you already know Beth. She's been on this channel a couple of times. If you don't know Beth, Beth is a dear friend of mine. She has a background in biochemistry, and she is also the founder of the incredible skincare line, Maysama. Now, Beth, thank you so much for being here, first of all.
Thank you for having me back.
I love having you here. Beth, I read your blog on rosacea recently, and I thought I have to have you back on because both of us have experienced severe rosacea. Both of us have dealt with it differently. And rosacea is something that affects 1 in 10 women. So it is quite common. So I am hoping by us talking about our experience and how we dealt with it, it can be helpful to people.
Absolutely. I think that's what it's about, isn't it? Sharing our experiences in the hope that others will benefit from that.
Yes, exactly. Now let's dive right into it. What would you say the definition of rosacea is?
Well, it's characterized by reddening to the skin, which is typically a butterfly over the nose and cheeks. So, I mean, there's different trains of thought, but I think whichever way you look at it, it's an autoimmune disease. It's our body attacking itself, recognizing something as foreign and eliciting an immune response. And that immune response then causes vasodilation, so the capillaries expand, and that causes flushing. And then over time, some of those capillaries break down, and so you end up with more permanent redness.
And tell us a little bit about your experience first.
Gosh, well, I think I probably became aware of my rosacea when I was about 30. Mm-hmm. And at the time, it was just very much flushing and redness to the cheeks. And I went to a dermatologist and they gave me a topical cream, which I put on. I didn't see that particularly worked, but I used it diligently. And over the years, I think my rosacea just gradually got worse. And then I went to Spain. I lived in Spain for about 8 years and it almost disappeared. And I came back from Spain and it was good. It was in remission, shall we say, for a good 10 years. And then I hit menopause and all of a sudden, boom, it just came back with a vengeance. So it was worse than it had ever been. It wasn't just the redness. I then had the papules and I also had pustular lesions across my face. I didn't even know what it was. I wasn't sure that it was related to rosacea. And I went to a dermatologist and she said, yes, I do believe that that's rosacea. And she treated it with antibiotics, which worked for me. The antibiotics worked immediately and cleared my skin up, but it's not a long-term strategy. You can't stay on antibiotics forever. So I came off those antibiotics and every time I came off them, it came back. So I thought, oh my goodness, this is awful. So I wanted to treat my own skin and to learn about skin and learn about skincare. And that really was the start of my journey. And that was what my blog was about. So my skincare journey and really looking to treat and manage my rosacea. And what about yourself? Because your journey was very different.
It was quite different. But like you, it started in my 30s. I woke up one morning and I was under a lot of stress at that time. And I woke up and my face was bright red and I had the rash with it.
Yes.
And I actually thought I had poison oak. I know you're not familiar with poison oak. It's something we have in the United States.
Right.
But I treated it as if it was poison oak. I put chamomile lotion on it and it got worse and worse. And I think the thing we forget about rosacea is it's not just a superficial annoyance. It's actually quite uncomfortable and painful. Yeah. So I remember it burned and was very hot.
Absolutely.
And, at the time I was swimming a lot, so I couldn't wait to jump in the pool in the morning just to cool it down. And it was probably the worst thing for it, the chlorine and the sunshine without sun protection, but I didn't know any better. So eventually I went to the dermatologist and she said, yeah, you have rosacea. Here, take these antibiotics for the rest of your life. Yes. And she also gave me some Metrogel, which is probably what you used, a topical antibiotic.
Yes, I was prescribed Rosex first of all, and then later on Elantra became available, but I didn't find that either of those provided any relief for me.
Yeah, me either. I mean, the topical did nothing, and the antibiotic made me very sick, and it also didn't do anything. So she gave me a different one. I went back to the dermatologist. She gave me a different one. It did nothing.
antibiotics you got?
I don't remember. It was 20 years ago. I don't exactly remember, but she gave me two different ones, which were back then used for rosacea. So neither of them did anything. And I felt devastated because, again, it's not just a superficial annoyance. It does affect your self-confidence when you wake up with this red face. And but it also was very painful. So back then, I remember buying a real book. It was a hard copy. I can't even remember if there was internet back then, from a man who also had experienced rosacea and didn't get any help. And he realized that IPL, intense pulse light, could treat it. So that is the route I went. I went to a different dermatologist who gave me 5 sessions of IPL, and it was incredible. The first session already, I could tell there was about a 20% reduction. And after the 5th session, it was basically gone. I say basically gone because there were still, and we'll talk about this, there was still a lot of things I had to learn what to do and what not to do. But the acute rosacea was gone from the IPL treatments. So I was very relieved.
You look amazing.
Thank you. Now, what would you say for you the triggers were?
It's hard to say. I mean, there are a number of triggers that can affect rosacea. So environmental factors like UV light and changes in temperature. So for me, one of the biggest triggers is changes in temperature. So for example, when I get in a car, I find that that's quite a claustrophobic environment for me. I find it's equal to sitting in a greenhouse, really. You've got coming through the window, then you've got the heat, and that does make my skin flush a lot. So I'm always fiddling with the air conditioning, and my poor husband sat next to me is drinking copious amounts of coffee to try and keep warm. It's ridiculous. And even on long journeys, sometimes I've opted to sit in the back of the car just to save my skin. That's the extent that it's got to, really. My skin is much improved now, so I don't quite I don't have the same situation, but nonetheless many times I've opted to sit in the back of the car just to help my skin a little bit.
Yeah, your skin looks gorgeous. I mean, you would never guess right now that you have any problems with it.
Thank you. But if anybody does go back and read my blog, then there's images there which will show you just back to 2019 how bad my rosacea was. So it's lovely to be able to sit here today and feel confident enough to sit in front of the camera. I wouldn't have been doing that 2 years ago. So I think that's a testament to the journey that I've had, and also that you've had. And probably you would say the same thing. You said to me you didn't even have photos of you back in time. You didn't want to keep them, and it shows what an impact that it has on people's self-confidence. So yes, it's this is why we're doing this. This is why we're sharing our experiences, so that others can hopefully benefit from that. But yes, triggers we were talking about. So certainly change in temperature. For me, winter is worse than summer because I can avoid the sun. But what I can't do is go outside in the cold and then come back into a house that generally is not heated, or when you're going into other people's houses. That for me has always been quite difficult. And then there's other triggers for me which I try to avoid. So caffeine is one, alcohol is one. I drink some white wine. I don't drink any red wine because the tannins in red wine can potentially affect rosacea. So I avoid red wine entirely, and I've certainly reduced my alcohol intake because notably I do flush when I have alcohol. Spicy foods also affect my skin. Sometimes I can have a flare up if I eat spicy foods, so I try to avoid those, but I miss it. Else, I mean, I think those for me are the main triggers. What about for you? Were there triggers when you had rosacea? Were there particular triggers for you?
I definitely think stress. I think that was the biggest trigger, because later on in my life, I also had perioral dermatitis, and the same thing, it started when I had a lot of stress. So both of these conditions started when I was under a lot of stress and had really not learned how to manage my stress. So definitely stress. Sun exposure. I mean, I had so much sun exposure back then. I was a triathlete. I ran, biked, and swam outside without any sun protection in California. So definitely sun was a big trigger for me. I didn't notice spicy foods, and I still don't notice that. But alcohol, I don't really drink. My dad is an alcoholic, so I avoid alcohol. But the occasional red wine I had definitely makes me flush.
Yes.
So alcohol would be a trigger for me, I think, if I would drink. But I do believe stress for me was the biggest trigger. Definitely.
Yeah. That's very interesting. I don't find for me that emotional stress particularly triggers a flare up, but I do find that when my body is stressed, so when I get run down, if I get a cold or a virus, that definitely triggers a flare up for me. So it's good to know your triggers, that you can avoid them. And I think triggers are different for different people.
I can definitely say stress was a big one for me. So it's interesting that is not for you.
Rosacea for a good 10-year period, but it was when I hit menopause that it came. And that makes sense because rosacea is in part a compromised skin barrier. When we hit menopause, then we stop producing estrogen. Well, estrogen helps the skin barrier tremendously. It hydrates the skin, it thickens the skin, it produces collagen. So there's so many things. Without estrogen, it's not surprising that our skin barrier becomes compromised. And that for me was, again, the reason or a trigger as to why the rosacea came back in my 50s. And I'm now 4 years past when this started, and I'm definitely winning the battle. You know, what we're going to talk about today in terms of my skincare routine is necessarily a cure, but it's kind of my personal treatment plan and what worked for me or is working for me.
Beth, can you tell us really fast what it means to have a compromised skin barrier?
Sure. Well, a barrier is really to stop something coming in or to stop something going out. So when we talk about the skin barrier, we have lots of lipids in our skin that stop water being lost from our skin, so transepidermal water loss we've talked about, and also to stop the bad things getting into our skin. So it's a two-way barrier. So healthy skin secretes antimicrobial peptides, which is an important defense mechanism. But in the skin of rosacea patients, lots of studies have shown that these AMPs are overproduced. And then you get proteases, enzymes that come along, they break down those AMPs into tiny peptide fragments. And those little tiny fragments can cause inflammation. And that inflammation can disrupt lipid synthesis. So if it disrupts the lipid synthesis, it messes up the barrier, our skin barrier.
That is fascinating. So a compromised skin barrier can be one of the causes of rosacea.
Yes, absolutely. I think, you know, if you subscribe to the theory that rosacea is a skin condition, then you know, compromised skin barrier is absolutely, you know, the cause of that. But I think there could be more than one cause for rosacea. So skin barrier, you know, compromised skin barrier is certainly one of those. There's also talk about the dermadex mite. I don't know whether you've heard about that, but we all have these dermadex mites on our face. In rosacea patients, they found that there's an increased level of these dermadex mites. They're not sure whether that's a trigger or whether it's a cause. And of course, our skin health is often a reflection of our gut health. And there's certainly lots of evidence to suggest that rosacea patients have a greater prevalence of gastrointestinal diseases like Crohn's disease, like SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, celiac disease. So there's a whole list of gastrointestinal diseases that potentially are associated with rosacea as well. So I think, you know, when we're talking about rosacea and treatments for it, it's really important to take a holistic approach and not just think about treating the skin.
Yeah. You know, I think even just an imbalanced gut microbiome, which many of us have, can cause rosacea. And I think in my case, that was also partly the cause because I had starved my gut microbiome. And once I started eating again, I ate a ton of sugar. And it bothers me that the prescription for rosacea is antibiotics, which further imbalances our gut microbiome. So it might help temporarily, but in the long run, we are just imbalancing that gut microbiome further, causing the rosacea to get worse.
That's so true.
So I think, as you said, it is something that needs to be looked holistically and treated holistically.
Yes, absolutely. We've talked about rosacea in terms of the causes, the triggers. What we haven't done really is talked about the different types of rosacea. So touch on that briefly, because I know both of us have experienced what we would ordinarily call type 2 rosacea or papular rosacea is another name for it. So if we start with type 1 is purely just reddening to the cheeks. Type 2 is the same, but then you will get the papules as well, and pustular lesions. And it's interesting because I think a lot of people think that it's acne, but it's not acne, and you can't treat it in the same way as acne. So you know, in acne patients, they have an increased in sebum, but in rosacea patients, they generally have a drier skin, and the spots come from the capillaries. And it's something I didn't understand until more recent years. So it explains why, you know, when you get one spot and then the next morning, if that spot got infected, you can wake up with spots all over your face because it's systemic. It literally spreads through the capillaries so quickly.
Yeah.
So it has to have a very different approach to acne. So that's the first two. And then there's two other types of rosacea. We have type 3 is the rhinophyma, which affects the thickening of skin on the nose. That's more prevalent in men. And then the final one, type 4, is ocular rosacea, which affects the eyes and makes them very red and itchy.
So let's talk about what we can do about it. So tell us, because again, we treated it completely differently. Tell us how you were successful in treating your rosacea.
Well, for me, I started to learn about skin and to learn about skincare. And I think I was certainly at the time using products on my face which were possible irritants to the skin and sensitizing my skin further. So the first thing I learned was what to avoid more than what to use. So I stopped using any skincare with fragrance, any skincare with essential oils, which sometimes they wouldn't label as fragrance, but again can be irritants to the skin. And then just look for skincare with no known EU allergens in it. So again, looking for brands that really formulate for sensitive skin. I don't think anyone with rosacea would say they don't have sensitive skin, because sensitive skin is skin that reacts to things. So it's not a skin type, it's just what it does. So for me, it was a case of what not to use firstly, and then finding products that were hydrating, healing, protecting, and soothing to the skin. That really was my first step. And then as my skin health improved, I could start to use actives that my stage of life would be anti-aging, etc. But those came much later. It was starting for me very much with the basics. So finding a cleanser that worked for me, finding a serum that was healing, and using SPF. And I think that we share the same love of SPF, and you're going to talk a little bit about that. So I'm probably going to share 3 products with your viewers that started me really on my rosacea skincare journey, starting with the simple cleanser, which is this one here, the Roche Posay Toleriane Derma Cleanser. And I just love this because, again, it's fragrance free, it's a minimalistic formulation, there's nothing in there that's going to irritate your skin, and it's just perfect for removing makeup, SPF, everything. So it's a one-step cleanse. You don't need anything beyond that. It's just beautiful. And I use that each evening. I use other cleansers in the morning in the shower, or no cleanser at all, depending on what I want to do for the day. So that's the first one. The second one is an antioxidant serum. And I'm going to talk about my own serum because I formulated this in part for sensitive skin. We always formulate for sensitive skin, but in part as an SOS serum and an antioxidant serum as well. So Maysama Green Rooibos Pressed Serum. Rooibos it's a healing herb from South Africa. It comes from the plant Asphanthus linearis, and it's been used for centuries to treat skin conditions like psoriasis, like eczema, and even wound healing as well. And there's lots of data around wound healing with Rooibos. So for me, it was a really, really important ingredient that I felt would benefit people with sensitive skin and to treat rosacea potentially. And I also, within the formulation, I've got 3% niacinamide, because niacinamide, as we know, is a great multitasking ingredient. But for me, the most important part of niacinamide is its barrier repair properties. Then I've also got Centella asiatica in there, which is a beautiful active from Korea, which has healing properties again. And then it's loaded with humectants like aloe vera and glycerin and sodium hyaluronate, all those things that we need to hydrate our skin. And we know that hydration is so important for rosacea-prone skin.
You basically formulated this for you, this serum, but it has so many people in love with it, including myself.
And it looks like that. So, it's natural color and natural aroma of Rooibos. So it smells like tea.
Yeah.
There's there's no colors, no fragrance added to that. And it just sinks into the skin. I can't stop smelling it because it smells so beautiful. It smells like my cup of tea in the morning. But it's just so hydrating and healing. And that, for me, I know that it's helped me and, potentially could help other people as well.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from that, a product which is often recommended for rosacea is azelaic acid. So that was something that I incorporated very early on in my routine. It's a naturally occurring acid that you find in grains like wheat and rye and barley. And I've used several different formulations, but the one that I favour is the one from Garden of Wisdom. So they reformulated this last year. So it was a 10% azelaic acid, but they're now using 12% of an azelaic acid derivative, and it's the formulation is much improved. It's really silky. As I've tried, say, many formulations, I won't mention the other ones, but they're generally quite grainy. And this is just beautiful. It just is so silky and smooth and absorbed by the skin really well. So it's something that, say, azelaic acid as an active is generally prescribed for rosacea patients. So it's something that I have continued to use in my skincare routine.
It's definitely working. Like I said, I mean, your skin looks amazing. You would never think that just a year ago you had severe rosacea.
Thank you.
So it looks incredible.
I think, in April this year, I had a flare up. And I think for me, it tends to be April and September. I quite often get flare-ups. And I don't know whether other rosacea people will relate to this, that when you get the changes in the seasons, it's quite normal. The change in the UV light in April and again in September can cause a flare-up. So I certainly do experience that. But I think with the skincare routine that I've honed, it didn't last too long. It managed to, that was a good thing for me, that you move on quite quickly.
Good.
Tell me about, I'm dying to know about your SPF, because
well, I want to ask you one more question first.
Yes.
Aside from those products, did you also work on your gut health? Did you change anything else, or do you think for you it was really the products and avoiding certain ingredients?
I think everything is cumulative. So I've taken a skincare first approach because that's more in my area of understanding. I'm not a nutritionist. I don't know so much about gut health, but for me, what I did understand was very important was to take probiotics for the gut and try and repair my gut health. So I have been taking probiotics, and plus avoiding the foods that I said to you. I don't have a gluten-free diet. I'd like to. I'm just not disciplined enough. So at some stage, if I up my game, I think that would be next for me. And what about you and your diet?
I have changed a lot in my diet. I mean, for me, it basically, I had to first of all start eating because I was anorexic. And so I didn't get enough nutrients. I had stuffed my gut microbiome. I had stuffed my body. So definitely diet, I think, has a huge part in it. First of all, eating, getting enough nutrients.
Yes.
Cutting out inflammatory foods. For me, inflammatory foods and foods I was sensitive to were gluten as well as dairy. So cutting those out made a huge difference in my skin, but also the way I feel overall, because I was always bloated. And then, working on my gut microbiome. I've really worked on my gut microbiome, incorporating pre-probiotics from vegetables, from fiber, incorporating many probiotic foods. I eat a lot of plant-based yogurt, kombucha.
Yes, kombucha. Yes.
Yeah, I make my own kombucha. So I really try to incorporate at least one probiotic food a day, if not several. Aside from that, stress management was huge for me because, like I said, stress was definitely a trigger for me. I used to be a very anxious person.
Unavoidable in my life.
It's unavoidable. Stress is unavoidable, but it's how we deal with it,
Yeah.
And there's also positive stress, but the body doesn't really distinguish. Getting married is positive stress, for example, but the body doesn't distinguish between positive or negative stress.
Yes.
So since it is unavoidable, I had to really learn to manage it. And that has made a huge difference. But aside from that, the IPL got me started. But like you, I had to learn, first of all, what to avoid. Well, the most important thing was to use sunscreen. After the IPL, I really noticed whenever I would go out in the sun, I'd be out there for hours running, biking, swimming, I would get red and my skin would start burning. So I had to really learn about sunscreen. Now, this was in my 30s, so this was 20 years ago. And back then, sunscreen wasn't what it is now. I remember I went to a health food store and I bought a zinc oxide sunscreen because in that book that I had read,
yes,
the person said that chemical sunscreens are a no-no for rosacea. So I was grateful to have learned that. So I bought a physical sunscreen and I looked like a clown. So I didn't really want to wear it, but I did. And that made a big difference. Not just protecting myself from the sun, but I think the zinc oxide being very healing also helped calm my skin down and help it heal. I also realized that I couldn't really use anything with a lot of alcohol in it. Witch hazel was a big one for me. Witch hazel really irritated my skin.
Yes.
So I had to learn what to avoid and then what to use instead. So now I can use retin A, I can use all kinds of things. But I really think having done all those things, having healed my gut microbiome, stress management, all of those things has led me to being able to do that.
I completely
yeah.
Here I've started to introduce retinoids as well, but I wouldn't do that, that I wouldn't have been able to do it.
I never thought I would ever be able to. I thought it's, all I can use is baby products or something. So you can definitely heal your skin.
Yes.
It is definitely possible. Yeah. Yeah. But sunscreen is a big one for me now. These are the ones I use most frequently. This is a mineral only. This is actually a combination one. It does have chemical sunscreen in it. But at this point, the combination doesn't bother me. But I wouldn't use just a chemical sunscreen on my face. So Elta Md, I love. There are actually many sunscreen. I'm sorry?
I think I heard about that from you and YouTubers as well. So I'm certainly interested to try the one on the left.
This one, the Restore?
Yes.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It has it has 15% zinc oxide.
Okay.
So it's really, really beautiful. But it goes on like a serum. It is lovely. So those don't irritate my skin at all. And then, of course, I use Maysama. You know that. I love it. But another serum that I have found, again, I don't really get rosacea flare-ups anymore.
No.
But if I feel that I get some redness because I have overdone my retin A or something, then this is something I love. This is the NeoGenisis Recovery. It's a stem cell serum, and it's very calming. It's very hydrating. So it's human stem cell conditioned media. It's really beautiful.
Lovely.
But aside from that, like I said, I really feel at this point I have conditioned my skin to the point where I don't really have to worry so much about products. One thing I wanted to mention too that I feel has really helped me is watching my omega-3 intake. You talked about earlier about fatty acids in our skin.
Yes.
And for me, that is something I've really noticed, focusing on getting my omega-3 intake up. Omega-3s are anti-inflammatory, has helped my skin a ton.
Through your diet?
Through my diet. I also supplement. I take a supplement from algae, but I eat a lot of chia seed, flaxseed, hemp seed. Every morning I have a couple of tablespoons in my yogurt, and that has made a big difference.
That's
keeping the inflammation down.
About me spending some time in Spain, and I was out there for 8 years. And when I lived in Spain, my diet was quite different. So it was certainly very fish-based. I think because it was so hot, we drank so much water all the time. So I do believe that plays a part as well. So again, it reinforces that diet is so important.
Yeah, it is. As you said earlier, it all comes back to treating it holistically.
Yes.
It's not just something we can just take some antibiotics for and slap on some Metrogel, and it's, it's going to be a frustrating ride if we do that. Yes. But both of us, a good example of it is definitely something that can be treated. And, as frustrating as it seems when you have it, because it is, I mean, let's face it, it's very frustrating because, again, it affects your whole life.
It really does. It really does. And talking of treating, so you use the laser. The laser was your approach.
Mm-hmm. The IPL, yeah, the intense pulse light.
The intense pulse light. And we both have a home laser device.
Yeah, the Faustina. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on the Faustina?
I got the Faustina. So the Faustina is a home IPL device, intense pulse light. I got it for that reason because, thanks for showing it. I left mine upstairs. I got it for that reason because after my 5 initial treatments, I was getting one once a year or so. But since I moved so much, it's always difficult to find a provider. So I thought, I'll get a home IPL treatment and that's it. It's definitely not like an in-office treatment. I have had good results with hair removal on my husband with it, which is interesting. I'm using it on myself right now under my arms and in my bikini area, but it's too soon to tell. As far as redness, I feel it gives me a little bit of reduction. I have a lot of redness still on my neck and my chest. That is not necessarily rosacea. That is just sun damage. It has reduced it slightly, but you can see there's still plenty of redness. I did have a red spot on my cheek, which it took away. But it's hard to say because I don't have active rosacea anymore, how much it will do for that.
Yes.
How do you feel it works for you with that?
Well, I believe that it's really helped to improve my skin tone and the skin texture a little bit over the past year. So I've been using that since, I think, say September last year. Okay. It hasn't given me the results I anticipated. I saw a friend had bought the device and the results that she got were, I think, pretty incredible, to be honest.
I saw that, yeah.
Expectations were set pretty high and it didn't deliver to that degree, but I'm certainly not disappointed that I bought it. Mm-hmm. I think that it has been beneficial to my skin and I will continue to use it. I don't use it religiously. I probably just come back to it maybe, once a fortnight or once a month because I'm doing so many other things at the moment. It's always hard, isn't it, to just sort of keep moving forward and using the same things. But yes, I would still recommend it to anyone with rosacea because I think it will bring them some benefit.
I agree with you. I don't regret buying it. It was about, $250. I mean, if you get an IPL treatment in office, you pay that much. So, I don't regret buying it. But you have to lower your expectations. It's definitely not like an in-office treatment.
That's right. Yeah.
Absolutely. What else do? You use red light therapy. I know that.
Yeah. Well, I think if there was one thing that really has been the game changer for me over the last year, I would say it's been red light therapy. Mm-hmm. I think, your viewers are probably familiar with red light therapy because we've spoken about it before, but it's basically just using the red light wavelength, so 630 or 850, which is near infrared, to treat the skin. It's used for various things, but in terms of anti-aging, it also has an anti-inflammatory effect, which is hugely important for people that have rosacea. Yeah. And I use it alongside my Maysama serum because there's evidence that supports that if you use antioxidants with LED light therapy, they have this complementary action. So the red light produces free radicals, and they're important because they stimulate biological processes. But then if you have free radicals and you have an excess of free radicals, so if you're using a high fluence LED light, then potentially it can overwhelm your natural antioxidants defense mechanisms. So if you then pair that with a topical antioxidant that is then going to fight free radicals, it can help improve the outcomes from that. So that's my morning routine. I apply my Maysama serum. I do 5 to 7 minutes of red light therapy. And for me, it's wonderful downtime. I just love those 5 minutes, or 7 minutes in the morning. I just sort of close my eyes and obviously have my goggles on. And I just get myself prepared for the day. But I've also got my Mito red light, which is this beautiful beastie here.
Wow.
Which I absolutely love. So I use my Mito red light for a sort of more intense treatment. Mm-hmm. And as you know, I've been suffering with a bad back as well. So I've valuable for treating my bad back. And I also use it for treating my gut because you can do it, I can hang it on the back of the door and then I do a more targeted treatment around my gut with the Mito red light. So again, this more holistic approach to that. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. What would you say if somebody is experiencing rosacea the top tips you could give them?
That's a really good question. Both you and I have had experience with dermatologists, and I would never say to anybody, don't go to a dermatologist, but I would say do your own research and learn about skin and skincare as much as you can. I mean, obviously, that's different things to different people, but don't just go and take a course of antibiotics and think that that is going to serve you well for the long term. It's not a long-term strategy.
Yes,
so
that's great advice.
Seek medical advice, and I think when you have a flare up, if you have a flare up, then it is good to go and get medical advice and get a diagnosis. But outside of that, there's so much information available on the internet. That's right there at your fingertips. Please don't just rely on a doctor's diagnosis and treatment, because there's so much more you can do, so much more you can do for yourself inexpensively, and will probably serve you better in the long term.
That's great advice. Yes, I agree. And I also think don't lose hope, because I know when I went through it, I felt very hopeless. I was 30 years old and I thought, is this what I have to look like for the rest of my life now? And, again, sometimes when we talk about superficial things, it seems so superficial, but it affects your whole life. And it is really something that it dampens your self-esteem. It dampens the way you go out into the world. So that was definitely something I thought back then, this is how my life is going to be now. So if you are experiencing rosacea right now, don't lose hope. There are so many things we can do now. There are so many, from when I was diagnosed and you were first diagnosed, we have learned so much about it. And yeah, antibiotics are not necessarily the end all be all. So I would say don't lose hope. Educate yourself, like you said, and know that it can be treated and it can be cured. Definitely.
That's a really, really powerful message to end on.
Thank you. But I think that's important because both of us haven't gone through it. We know how, once you're in the midst of it, you think this is it. There's no way out of this, but there definitely is.
Absolutely is.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was awesome. And as always, I learned something new from you. Thank you so much, Beth.
Thank you, Claudia. Lovely to work with you again.
Likewise. And I will link your blog down below so people can read it and can also look at the pictures.
I think it's my most read blog. So I think that, now you're going to push it even higher up on Google.
But that's good. I mean, that shows you how many people are affected by rosacea and how many people are looking for help.
Yes.
So you are doing that. You're helping people. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Bye. Sure. Know what that means. Well, what that means.
So oh, I never struggled to say that before.
That's okay.
And of course, our skin health is often a reflection